Hello everyone, in today's video talking about 40k factions that I don't play and my reasons why, and we're going to be starting off with the Armies of the Imperium for today's video. Now, starting off this list, talking about the Imperium, talking about Imperial armies that I don't play, but have either been mildly interested in or have my reasons for not wanting to play them, will be the Adeptus Custodes. Now, first of all, I don't really care for their lore. I don't really care for the idea of them. I mean, like, them being the Emperor's bodyguards is fine and all, but, like, if the Emperor's intended plan for them was to eventually kill all Space Marines and, and potentially even the Primarchs, should the Great Crusade have succeeded and the Horus Heresy never happened, it just seems kind of dumb, because at that point it's like, well, why not have continued with the Custodes and made them more than just 10,000 strong? Like, that's just my way of looking at it. But secondly, their models look really good. I'd say they're very well detailed. With that, and just because of their usual color scheme, they look easy to paint. I mean, you just basically paint them, whatever color of gold you have, or bronze or brass. Do a little bit of highlighting and do the cloth and leathers, and boom, you're done basically. From what I know, and from like what I've looked when I was looking into armies to start, that I know that they are one of the cheaper armies to collect, like to get an army of, and that's because their units cost a lot of points. And to the point of them being cheaper, I'm not a fan of needing to get Forge World models or accessory like kits for them if you want to use some units. So some immediate examples that come to mind are Telemon dreadnoughts, the Graph tanks, some of the jetpack or jump pack Custodes, and some other units of Custodes that have like heavy bolt rifles and what have you. Their army rule isn't all that complicated, but I do think that it's kind of a boring army rule, because it basically just reads as, hey, when a Custodes unit is in melee, you can choose to either give them lethal hits or I think sustained hits 1 on their melee attacks when in the fight phase. It's kind of boring. To that end, I think if the Lions of the Emperor detachment rule was their army rule, that would have made them a lot more interesting, and it definitely would have played like that, would have embodied the idea of like, hey, each Custodes is a hero in their own right, and their army rule reflects that. If Lions of the Emperor's detachment rule was their army rule. Now, moving on to the Adeptus Mechanicus. They're one of the armies that I don't have like a whole lot to say in terms of bullet points, but I don't really feel like there's a whole lot to say about them. I do think their models look pretty freaky, but like really cool. There's a really good, like, nice, cool aesthetic to them. Though when looking at their models, and this is kind of, I'd say, across the board, they look nightmarish to paint and even to potentially assemble, with like the little dangly bits and what have you. From what I know of like hearing from other people, the Admech are very, very expensive to collect. And that is mainly, if I'm not mistaken, that is because some of their units only come in boxes where like they have only so many, and you need to get 2 of those boxes, and those boxes cost a lot, and you need to get a lot of those boxes because the units themselves don't cost a lot of points. And then of course, in lore, right, in the setting, the Admech are an incredibly important faction to the lore and the setting of Warhammer 40k. Especially for the Imperium in particular. Whether we're talking about Belisarius' Call or the Emperor making the Treaty of Olympus Mons with the Cult or the Mechanicum back in the Great Crusade times, or like in before. But that's really all I have to say about them. Or actually, I mean, I've read their army rule. At first, it kind of read off as a little tiny bit confusing, but since having reread it, their army rule isn't all that bad. Doesn't seem all that complicated. But yeah, I have nothing much more to add about the Admech. But the biggest, other than the biggest turnoff from me personally wanting to start with them or like try to learn them, is just that, man, they look horrifyingly hard to paint, and Uh, one of the more expensive armies to collect and like get assembled. Moving on to the Adeptus Sororitas, or the Sisters of Battle, as everyone likes to call them. Overall, in terms of their models, I think they all look good. I have my own personal gripes with some of the models, and that'd be like the Archoflagellants, since they are really the only model or only unit that I don't like the look of. Though I completely understand the purpose of them and lore, and what the point is of them. When it comes to the overall aesthetic of the Sororitas, they look cool. They're nuns with guns. There's this, you know, very extreme religious elements to them. And that's regardless if we're talking about your standard battle sister squad, or a castigator, or the sister, or their war suits. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. My bad. But like overall, just the aesthetic of the sisters, really cool. One of the reasons why I've always been mildly interested in wanting to like at least give them a try. But to that point, as a big reason why I never considered trying them out was their army rule with the whole like Miracle Day system, and it just seemed very confusing when read. Like when reading it comes across as very confusing, but just from what I've seen in practice, like how it's used in practice, it seems incredible. It looks incredibly straightforward, and that's a point of criticism I can make with other armies that GW have, that are in 40k, where man, their army rule has like 2-3 paragraphs of description of what it does, but then it's like you could sum up the effect of the ability, like what it does and how it works, within 2 or 3 sentences. I get the reason why army rules like the sisters may be so expansive of like the description is to ensure that you understand, hey, this is exactly how this ability works in these conditions. But it seems to me it seems a little tad bit unnecessary. Maybe for some other armies it is necessary, but just it seems extreme. I know alongside other like the non or less than elite armies, Sisters Battle can be expensive to collect, similar to guardsmen, orcs, tyranids, admech. Maybe not as expensive, but definitely still you're not playing an elite army or a semi-elite army, so you're gonna have to spend more to get all of your units, get them all mustered and loaded out properly. And then with their overall like profiles and stat profiles and weapon profiles, I'm not a fan. Now in the case of the weapon profiles, it's a little less so, just because they're not too dissimilar to some Space Marine profiles. But you would think for the Sisters of Battle wearing power armor, I know it's not the same as like Space Marine power armor and whatever have you, but you'd think that because they're wearing power armor and because they are considered some of the elite within the Imperium, right, that they would be a little bit better at shooting, and a little bit tougher. And what I mean by that is I mean more like, hey, like why, them being toughness 3 is kind of, I don't know, weird to me, especially since they also are 1 wound. Why not, couldn't they be like a little bit tougher or have like 1 more wound, or like or it'd be crazy if they had an invuln save, and then but that's just my general like nitpicks. And moving on to the Astra Militarum, or the Imperial Guard, as basically everyone lovingly calls them, because that's what everyone thinks of. They are one of my favorite factions in 40k, and that is 100% due to just the fact that they are the everyman faction. They are your army man guys, your normal in quotes people, just doing what they gotta do. Like they probably don't want to be here fighting a fucking like wave of tyranids or orcs or whatever, but like they gotta do that, and they just kind of make do. And yeah, sure, their typical lifespan for deployment is like 15 hours, but I mean, hey, they're just dudes. They're just guys being dudes. With regards to their the army rule, and I forgot to I forgot to put rule in that little main bullet point, but from reading their army rule definitely looks complicated. I'm sure you can boil it down to it's not that different from the Sisters of Battle, where it reads as complicated, but in practice it's as simple as just, hey, if you have an officer unit, when it's your command phase, you can have that officer unit give a unit within however many inches of it in order, and then that order does blank. I'm sure you could boil it down to it's as simple as that. But when reading it and having played against it once, it just comes across as kind of complicated. And to that point, some of the detachments for the guardsmen, at least from what I've seen, also don't help with that. Like some of them just kind of add a little extra layer of complication to it, at least in my opinion, right? And I'm saying this as like a Space Marine chaos, a Chaos Space Marine player, you know. But it comes across as complicated. And I also do know that the Militarum, right, the Guard, are a expensive army to collect, not too dissimilar to Orcs or Tyranids, and that is 100% due to just their points cost per unit being low. Like unless you're doing a predominantly like Bane Blade and Storm Blade and Leman Russ heavy, army, you're gonna have a lot of guys on the board that don't cost a lot of points, that are gonna cost you a lot of money to get that many guys. And that to me is the big turning off point from like when to play guardsmen. Now, yeah, there's the whole thing of, oh, if you've played on Tabletop Simulator, why does it matter? You can still play guard. Well, it's a matter of I want to be able to collect these guys in person, so that way it's like, hey, the army I play in Tabletop is the Tabletop Simulator is the same army I can play in person with like friends or at a local game store or whatever have you. And just from that sheer fact alone, the guardsmen, similar to like Tyranids and Orcs, are an army where I love them and I would love to collect them and play them, but like that's a prospect that's just like way out there, at least to me. With Imperial Agents, they don't exist. They don't exist in a story. Moving on to Imperial Knights. They are my dad's favorite army. He is a big fan of mechs, and therefore, because they are big mechs, they are cool. You can argue with me in the comments about that, but I'm right. They are one of the cheaper armies to collect, and that is 100% due to just each one of them costing hundreds of points. I mean, Armigers cost 130 to 140 points. Big Knights cost 300 and something points average. So, if you want to just run Big Knights, you run Big Knights. Cool. You have an army that's at most like five models. Their army rule with the whole like Code Chivalric or whatever system looks kind of confusing. I'm not gonna say hard or like complicated. It just seems confusing. I don't know. I've never played them. I've only briefly read through the description of them. It just seems kind of out like weird. Feel free to correct me or like enlighten me as to like how that all works. With regards to their profiles, their stat profiles and weapon profiles, they're freaking insane. But they also they should be, because you're dealing with 50 plus foot tall mechs that have guns that can glass entire like swaths of of land and whatnot. So like they should be kind of crazy. Maybe not as like overpoweredly strong as they are currently, pre-codex, but they're really good. And then like to answer a question is like, oh well, like if you like the knights a lot, right? If they're like big mechs, therefore they're cool and all that, like why not start them? And I told my dad this a little bit ago, where it's like, for me, like I like the knights, but I personally wouldn't want them to be my first army to play, because they just play so much differently than other factions, right? Because at the worst, in terms of like however many things you can run around with, you're gonna run around with a whole bunch of war dogs or a whole bunch of arbigers. Each one of those costs 140 130 points. So in a 2,000 point game, you can have like over 10 armigers, assuming no weird like funny interactions. And then a big knights, which I think is like the main appeal to knights, is just, hey, I want to take a knight castellan or a knight or a or a knight lancer, just like the big guys. It's like, well, you can only take in a 3,000 point game like 6 of them or less. That's still a lot, and I mean, in terms of total wounds and toughness and shooting, like that's a lot to deal with as a non-knight player. But it's just a completely different kind of game that you're playing, like than, let's say, Space Marines or Orcs or Tyranids or Necrons. And then, moving on, talking about the Grey Knights. Dude, their aesthetic is clean. I've always liked how they look with just their silver slash like brushed steel. I know it's silver, but like brushed steel look of their power armor, the knightly kind of helmets, the all the extra filigree and like scripture on their armor. Not the biggest fan of necessarily. At least like I like it when it's like a bit more minimal, not so like it's all over them. I get the purpose and lore as to like why that is. It's to protect them from the warp and what have you. It's perfectly fine. And like in the lore context, I just think like from the model context, there's that little criticism. Speaking of the models, they do desperately need a model refresh. Like they need a Primaris kind of Primaris scale update to get their proportions all better suited, make them look better, cleaner, better detail. Yeah, I know you could just take like your Space Marine models or whatever, kit bash them together to make them into Grey Knights, but that's just a whole lot of extra work, and that's just that's having the people, the community, the players solve a problem that GW could actually easily fix, right? Yeah, I know there goes into the whole like they have to produce it and they have to market it and all that, but still, it's a problem that GW knows, is aware of. I'd imagine, and that if they should fix it, right, or they should address it in some capacity. With their general army role of like being able to do like teleport shenanigans, or if that might not be their army role, that may be their like their original index detachment, but with most of their units, if not all of their units, being able to do like teleport shenanigans, I think that's like really cool, and it's also really unique. I think it allows for a very interesting style of play. Of just having these like up and down units of Space Marines, just hey, I'm over here, hey, now I'm over there, and I'm I'm using a flamer on your boys, and then now I'm over here doing the same thing to your objective. It's funny. I'm sure it's annoying to deal with to a degree, but it looks fun. Definitely something I'd be down to try. I know that they're also one of the cheaper armies to collect, similar to Custodes, and that is primarily because they are a elite army. Though I know that in terms of their unit range, like what data sheets and whatnot they don't have much access to anti-vehicle stuff, like big things. I mean, yeah, they have their demon hammers, or thunder hammer equivalents, but beyond that, they don't really have anything that can reliably at range punch into tough things, as far as I'm aware. I mean, I know they have like venerable land raiders and what have you, but beyond that, I'm not sure what more they have. And then just kind of cap off, I know in the terms of bullet points, this wasn't necessarily in order. I don't really care for them in lore. Like, I mean, it's cool. I do think like the idea, the presence of like the Grey Knights and like what they're meant to be, which is they are the Space Marines, right? That go after chaos, that go after the warp. That's perfectly fine. But it's just more of a. They seem kind of dumb, like at times. Like they do dumb things. It's not too. Oh, I forgot to address the Death Watch, but they're kind of part of the Imperial Agents. My bad, everyone. I forgot about the Death Watch. But I don't know, just Grey Knights kind of come across as dumb, but you could say that about a handful of other factions and characters within the Imperium, or just in 40k in general. They do dumb things for whatever dumb petty reasons. But with that, guys, that'll be the end of the video. So feel free to comment down below what your thoughts are on the different armies of the Imperium. I know I did forget about talking about the Death Watch. If I'm being perfectly honest, they kind of flew right over my head. Uh, if I had to like give it like a little quick like rundown of the Death Watch, I think in terms of an organization, the concept is cool. I think in terms of like what certain characters within the lore, from what I know of, have done, really freaking dumb. When it comes to mustering an army of Death Watch, from what I've seen, like, and when trying to figure out for myself, it seems super complicated to get an army of Death Watch units together. Then again, that might just be kind of a byproduct of, hey, Imperial agents are kind of the same way, and anything attached to the Inquisition is basically kind of doomed to be a little confusing. But beyond that, what kind of experiences have you guys had with these different armies, either playing with them or playing against them? Of course, let me know in the comment section down below if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. But with that, guys, hope you guys enjoyed my little thoughts and breakdown and like opinions on different armies of the Imperium. The next video will be about Chaos. Will be about the Chaos army, the armies of Chaos that I've not played. So that'll be just broadly talking about Chaos Demons and the Chaos Cult, or Chaos Demons, Chaos Knights, and the Chaos Cult Marine armies. But once again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to like the video. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to keep up to date. You don't have to if you don't want to. It does go a long way to help me gauge interests from you guys. But until the next time, I hope you guys have a great time wherever you may find yourself, whether you're wargaming, watching YouTube, studying, or at work. Hope you have a great time. But until the next time, see you guys later. Peace.